Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to have you join me back for another great episode of the How Did You Learn to Do That podcast. I can't wait for you to hear this episode, the story of Gaby and all the inspiring things that she does, and all the stories and the voices that she raises, and everything that she does day in and day out, and how much of an amazing person she really is. I'm so excited for you guys to hear her story, her journey, her perspective. And if there's anyone that you're inspired by that you want to be on the podcast, please send me an email, info@howdidyoulearntodothat.com, or you can head over to our website, howdidyoulearntodothat.com, and complete the nomination form. And if you love this episode, I would love if you could leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and like and follow us on all our social media accounts to help us grow. And with that, I hope that you have an amazing holiday season. I have only a couple episodes left for this year, which is so crazy to me. And I'm so excited to share that with you and see you in the new year. And I know we all will have big goals, big aspirations, big dreams to accomplish in 2021. So I wish you a happy holiday season, and I hope to see you in January. Stay tuned for Gaby. Hi, everyone. I would love to welcome Gaby to the How Did You Learn to Do That podcast. Welcome, Gaby.
Thank you, Angeza, for having me here and inviting me as a guest.
So I just want to tell you a little bit about Gaby. So Gaby, or Gabriela, is a social entrepreneur, an advocate, a community ambassador who has a heart and passion for people and community, as her career has been in program planning for various school districts and organizations with different demographics and needs. Working in community helped her start and found two organizations, Charlas.ca and Audacious Untold Stories. And I will tag both of her accounts in the link to the show notes as well. So you can reach out and check it out there too. So each platform advocates different topics that Gabriela is passionate about. Representation and taboos, to say the least. Beyond the scope of her work, Gabriela loves the great outdoors, and when she has time, there's nothing better than exploring. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I'm so excited for you to share your story, because I know you share so many stories of people and their journeys, and it's exciting to hear about you and what you do and everything that you've been inspiring to do.
Yes, no, definitely. Thank you. I know what you mean. It gets busy. And I'm very passionate with hearing everyone's stories. So I'm happy to share my story on your podcast.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll let you take it over. Just I want to know kind of what all the work that you do. How did you decide to get into that? What sparked that passion for you? What really got you to think that this is what you want to do in your life, and this is where you want to go with your entrepreneurial journey and your passions and all the work that you do every single day?
Yeah. So as you mentioned it, Angeza, with my introduction, I've worked in community since 2014. It's been a while. And so through that, I started to do a lot of like program planning, just interacting with different community leaders and just hitting different demographics, as you explained. But from then on, I noticed that it was just a bit of a passion that I really had. And then bridging a little bit of my business interest as well. I think this was a couple, like 4 years ago, I believe, I launched, or 3 years ago, around there to be exact. I actually started a jewelry collection. And so for me, it happened with, a friend who approached me who lives in Guatemala and was like, hey, what do you think if we do this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like I always wanted to tap into the whole business community. Right. And so I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt confident enough that I would figure it out along the way. And so, we started, and then it happened that a friend of mine, she was organizing a fashion show in the Latin community. And so she's like, I'm looking for people I don't know if you know any people who are like Latinos and, have a business, when it comes to jewelry, fashion. And then I'm like, there's the opportunity. I'm like, actually, I just decided to launch this business, but I don't really have anything like a page or, to show. It's just the products, slowly being made. And, people, I'm just selling it on, nothing too official just yet. I was just testing it out, market research, more or less, to say the least. Right.
Yeah.
And so she's like, no, it doesn't matter. Like totally. She loved it. She's like, we're going to launch it in the show. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's how initially that was my first business venture, right? Um, and it was, it was going strong. But personally speaking, I actually went through something, and that just made my whole life pivot. Right? I could say that it completely made me put everything, my life, my projects on hold. And because of that, I was dealing with a lot of things, personally speaking, with my health. And so, to say the least, I'm like, I feel like that's a whole nother podcast episode. But I was battling with my health. I wasn't in a place where I could give a lot of myself. And so, I stopped everything completely. And so that was me for about 2.5 years. Okay. So I did forget to mention that prior to this happening, I did attend one of the Van City Business Babes events, or a couple actually. And so I'm like, wow, this community is amazing. Like, I'm like, this is really it. Like, I started the jewelry business. I'm in the community. Like, I'm meeting other like-minded entrepreneur females. Like, this is so inspiring. And I just felt like everything was aligning. But then, I had that moment where I had to pause, and it was a long break. And because of that long break, it really led me to push myself, because I had to put a lot of work in my health. One of the things that I was dealing with a lot is mental health, which is the reason why I started Audacious, actually. And there's more of my story, I should say, on that platform, on Audacious. And it's like really dear to my heart. I advocate for things on like mental health, abuse, and just domestic violence. And so, these are the taboo topics, right? As you
Yeah.
mentioned in the intro. And so for me, it was like, okay, all these different ideas coming together. But I really, that pivoting point in my life, it was just like, you know what? It taught me to appreciate everything, to appreciate my life, to appreciate opportunities, and to just really live a life that I've always dreamed of. Like, there's nothing that you can't do. That's what I learned in my healing journey, right?
Mhm.
Because I was in such a low place in terms of like with my health and just everywhere in my life, in all areas that you can imagine, right? But I did put in a lot of work in terms of working towards a goal. And I could say that that's a skill set that I had just from before. And so that's the approach that I took. And that's how, I should say, the supports that I had, the resources knew how to work with me as well. It was like, okay, like this is a goal for you right now. It may seem impossible, but this is where we're going to work for you to be. Right. And so it was a lot of, and I feel like a lot of these like skills or or like lessons, more or less, are things that you can apply to day-to-day life or in the entrepreneurship world, like, consistency, hard work,
Yeah.
commitment, right? And so these, I had it first and foremost, I had to be loyal to myself, right? So I needed to be
Yeah.
consistent with myself. I needed to be honest, right? Because you could say that you always want to be honest and transparent when it comes to launching a business or your brand, right? And so I really felt like I was challenged to, dig in deeper and to look at myself in a mirror, literally, and be like, okay, this is where I'm at right now. I know who I am. What is it that I want? Right. And so
Mhm.
I was determined. That's really what it was. I'm like, I may feel this way, but I am going to have to do this and that. And it's not going to be easy. But once I get there, I know it's going to pay off. And that's exactly what happened. And like I said, I'm a huge advocate of like, opening up, asking for help, using your resources. And that's literally what I did to get the support that I needed. I couldn't have done it alone. I mean, it was kind of ironic because I've always worked in community. I've always been the one to support other people. But at this point in my life, it was the other way around. And that's, and for the first time, I was the person who was receiving all the supports, right? And the resources. And I understood it. And I'm like, all right, so this is what it means to be on the other side. And that's okay, right? Because even that was a huge learning opportunity for me. Like,
Mhm.
I'm such an opportunist. So that's really the mindset that I had for everything. I'm like, okay, so what is life trying to teach me right now? What is it that I need to learn so that I can move to the next, I guess, phase or stage of my life, right? In order to continue growing and working towards my goals. And so literally that's how it happened. It was just like, okay, little things, baby steps, right? It just didn't happen like, oh, it's, you don't start running when you're a baby, right? First
Yeah.
you crawl, you tumble, you get up. And that's literally the metaphor I would use for this, right? It was like, it was baby steps, one thing at a time, and being honest again with myself, like what's working for me and what isn't. I learned the importance of boundaries, work life balance. And it's funny because I did a podcast not too long ago with someone else too, and I was sharing on how um, I was learning. This was pre-COVID. So
Yeah.
pre-COVID, I was like meeting nonstop, and I didn't realize that that was almost like a way where I was using to not dig into what I really needed to focus on, which was myself. COVID happens. Clearly, everyone has a time, and so I was really forced to dig in deeper. And long story short, once I started to figure out, where I needed to be, I started to get busy again, occupy myself with meetings via Zoom, and I'm like, okay, need to work, work, work. Like I've always liked to work pretty much, or at least for me, working on a project is something that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've said I'm such a community nerd, because I really love that whole collaboration aspect of, coming together with people, great minds, and reaching a goal. So, but then I had to stop myself again, right?
Yeah.
Because of my supports, they came to me again and were like, "Hey, Gabby, where are you at? You need to go back and really assess what's important, and what's important is your health." So for me, I advocate like beyond everything, and even on my well, one of them is, I think, more obvious in terms of like advocating for your well-being. But even in my other platform, Charla's, which is to support and represent the Hispanic Latinx community, I'm always pushing in your mental health, well-being, self-care. Like, these things are so essential. I just think, like, to be I think, healthy person, it's just necessary. It's just like one of those things that everyone just needs to implement in their life. And it happens because burnout is real, to say the least. And then there's so much more behind that, right? And so it's like, and if you can apply these different areas in terms of your health, like even before this, I made myself go to the gym. I'm like, no, my goal is 3 times a week I have to go to the gym. That's my self-care.
Yeah.
um, because of COVID, my meetings for work, even for school, everything's online. Like, I think there's just no way around it that you can't ignore technology, right?
Yeah.
So I could say a lot,
Yeah.
but that's really what ignited me. Just going back to that place where I was tested and really challenged to redefine what I really wanted.
Mhm.
So and I think that's really my drive for anything, like just knowing that we only get one life, and that if we got that one life and we are able to, that we can work towards the things that we want. It's not going to be easy, the same way that I learned that in my healing journey, but with dedication, consistency, it's possible.
Yeah, I feel, and I'm a huge, huge believer that the universe, brings people into our lives at a certain time, whenever we need to hear certain messages. And although that I share a lot of what you've said on the podcast, and I've had people share it in all my brand. Sometimes, like you said, it's so easy to be the one sharing, the one giving, the one taking care of, but it's sometimes harder, or you miss those signals where, it's you need to be taken care of. You need to hear those messages. And I feel like everything you've just said, and I mentioned it just before we started recording, that I wanted to I had to actually realign myself into, like you said, like, addressing, what are you doing? Is it serving you? what are your non-negotiables? What is your priority? What can you do to take care of yourself, like you mentioned? And so I love that you've shared all that. I feel like your message and everything you've shared just has come at the right time for me personally. And it's just kind of, it's a great reminder, like you said, that if you're the one that's doing the, taking care of, and you're the one that's sharing, you know, the information and setting up the programs and all that, and sometimes when you have to be taken care of it, you need people to come to you and guide you through something you're trying to work through and heal from, and that you have to be able to accept it and acknowledge it and to learn from it too. And I think that, like you said, like seeing the other side and knowing, okay, so this is the other side, what do I need to do to learn from this, so that I could be better when I'm serving other people, now that I understand what it's like to be from this side. And I love that you shared that. And those topics that you mentioned that are taboo, um,
Mhm.
I feel like it's just, I mean, I haven't had personal experience myself with a
Mhm.
lot of those, some of those topics, but people really close to me,
Mhm.
I firsthand have watched, the abuse,
Mhm.
the mental health. I've firsthand watched addiction, unravel within people very close to me. And it's just those subjects, like you said, they're so common, they're
Yes.
so common. It's
Yeah.
just every single time I bring it up to somebody, someone says to me, "Oh, I know what you're going through because I've gone through it, or someone close to me has gone through it, or I've been, experienced this
Mhm.
through someone I know that's close." And it's so common, but I'm so surprised, and I'm just so like flabbergasted that it's still considered taboo in this day and age, right? And I
Mhm.
think that that is where, um, even having a conversation like this with you, and I know you've probably experienced this too, is that if we share something happy and, exciting, we get, there's so much joy around that. There's a lot more engagement. There's a lot more people saying, yes, go for it. I'm so happy for you. But when you
Mhm.
share something raw and you share something real and you share, experience that maybe is not, all roses and butterflies, it's harder for people to kind of be there and comment and message and know how to react with that information, right? It becomes almost like an awkward situation where people are like, "Well, I don't really
Mhm.
know what to say here,"
Mhm.
and I love what you share there, because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more common it gets, the more people realize that, hey, you know what, I can reach out, and what I could do, because if you didn't know what to do before, it's just you could listen, or you could just lend, a listening ear, or you can just be there without an agenda, without any expectations or anything like that. And so I absolutely love what you've had to share. And yeah,
Thank
and the
you.
fact that you're kind of paying attention to your non-negotiable of your health, and checking yourself back in, not once but twice
Mhm.
so far, since COVID. And just being like, hey, like, I'm going through these patterns again, and I need to take care of myself first. I think it's so true. It's so hard to get lost in your day to day, right? It's just
Yes.
hard to set aside even like half an hour. Like today, like before COVID actually hit, I was
Mhm.
doing I was exercising 4 days a week, and 2 of those days was yoga, because yoga
Oh.
to me is very meditative and it's very soothing and healing, and really, like, my mental health is super important to me, so I try to take as much care of it as I can with journaling, and all that. But I find yoga has always been the best one for me, and I only discovered it actually when I was pregnant, because I wanted to do prenatal yoga classes, and then I really loved it, so I continued it. So once COVID hit, of course, everything closed, right? Like all
Yeah.
gyms, everything. And I tried to do it at home, but it's not the same when you have like 18-month-old crawling all over you.
Mhm.
It's not the
Yeah,
same
no, of
meditative
course.
practice.
It's not easy.
So no, so
Yeah.
I actually did it today for the first time. I got up earlier. I got up earlier than my daughter, and I actually like just
Oh.
like it was only 15 minutes, but I just took some time to just like do some poses that were relaxing and healing for me, and it just like changed my whole day,
Good
just from
for
those
you.
15 minutes. And I think that's so it's and I kept thinking to myself, I'm like, so why don't I have 15 minutes in my regular days to do this? Like, why do I have to get to a place where like I feel so like
Mhm.
overwhelmed that I need to do this? Like it's a
Mhm.
survival thing. And I was like, why can't I do this from a maintenance perspective?
Mhm.
But that's but and what you said, it's just like it's so hard to get lost in the day to day, right? And you're instead of doing the maintenance, you wait until like your
Mm.
car's about to die, and like then you're like, okay, I need an oil change, or I need to go get gas. I need to go figure
I'm
this
really
out.
bad with my car too. I've learned the hard way. Yeah, I've learned, believe me. So it's like
Yeah,
a life lesson for everything and anything in my life, really. And it's applicable, I think, for anything. Like going back to what you were saying, right? Like those 15 minutes. Like sometimes it's hard. It's difficult to break cycles. I mean, and I say, let's be real. We're in a pandemic. It's not easy. Like I started to notice because I started to check in with myself
yeah,
just last week. I was like, this is getting too much. I'm like, too much technology. Like, there's just no way around it. Like, I have to work
mhm,
from a computer at work. I am going to work, right? But a lot of my work is on a computer. Okay. And then, two, it's like I have my classes online. And then I work from my phone to manage the platforms that I have, right? And so, like, honestly, for me on my phone, as we were mentioning pre the recording, was like my phone is work for me too. That's how I see it.
yeah,
And so I'm like, wow, this is tough. It really is because it's so hard to meet up with someone and to say the least, right? Because of the situation, the times that we're living in. And then two, it's like the weather's changing. So, right, that starts to hit a lot of people too.
yeah,
And beyond that, it's like the reality of what's happening. And then I started to notice myself last week just thinking on how like dreading all of this was starting to be. I was starting to feel overwhelmed. I'm like, ooh, I'm starting to see some triggers, right? So I'm like, no, I have to commit to the not 3 weeks, but 3 sessions of working out at least a week,
yeah,
as or even like having some time to go out. So the Wednesdays, I've booked it off as my time where I don't do anything unless I really need to, right?
yeah,
Like nothing for just for it's me time. Because believe it or
yeah,
not, even my weekends are they're crazy. And so I
yeah,
mean, I don't complain because I like it that way. Because that's just how I strive.
yeah,
But like always remembering and checking in, like, is my balance there? Am I taking care of myself? Did I take enough time for myself, right? And I just and going and of you from all people, because with your background, right? You understand the importance of that, right? Taking care of your
yeah,
mental health.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that taking, like you said, like inventory of your days, like, and being like, where, and actually, Gabby and I actually both don't know. We also met through the Action Takers Club. I've had a couple of people on the podcast from there.
yes,
And one of the founder of the Toronto Business Babes, Lauren, who was on a couple of weeks ago, she was actually telling me and probably talked about it in that episode that she she works with a coach of self-care coach, and when she does her like plan for the week at the
wow,
beginning of the week, she actually schedules in self-care throughout her
I love
time.
that.
And
Hmm.
so before we had our recording, she had 10 minutes of meditation where she just laid in bed and she just meditated so she can put herself in a mental place that
Hmm.
allowed her to prepare and be ready for the podcast and to go there, as opposed
Yes,
to going from one to another. And she said she needed that space, or she does, walks or runs with her dog, and actually schedules that into her day. Otherwise, she says that if I don't have it scheduled, it's just not going to happen because I can find other things to fill my whole day.
hmm,
And for me personally, I just realized that like I've always been a night owl since it's all the way back to my university days. You pull like be in class all day, then you put like the late nights, the all nighters, all that. So
lighters.
yeah, and like I've always, and like you have like the evening jobs too, right? When you're in
Yeah.
school, so you come home, then you do some homework. So I've always been a night owl.
Hmm.
And I just thought I could function that way, right? Night owl, get up late in the morning and kind of start my day late, like start my day like 9. But then obviously having my daughter, she just changed my whole life, because not just physically, like because I became a mom, but
Yeah.
because she changed my whole time, like my whole timeline. She gets up at 6:30 and she doesn't care what time you went to bed.
That's
She's up at 6:30 and she's ready to
Awesome.
go. So realized soon enough that like I need to go to bed. And now it's actually funny because if it hits 8:30, 9 o'clock, like right now, like I get tired. I'm ready for bed. And
Yeah.
I go to bed. Yeah, my husband and we go to bed at 9:30, and
Mhm.
we get up at like between 5 and 5:30, so that we get some time to like do something slow for ourselves. And I just love doing that. Getting up earlier, getting that time to have like a slow day, a slow morning. It just sets me up for so much of a like much more of a calmer day, much more of a calmer attitude in just allowing me to absorb anything that's going on throughout the day, right? And this last week I've had actually a pretty tough week because I have someone really really close to me that suffers from mental illness. And they get it was pretty much under wraps, not under wraps, but it was treated, like she was able to treat it, and managed all her symptoms and managed her healing, and was doing really well for the last about 4.5 years. She was
Wow.
doing really well, and she actually self-medicated with substances like alcohol, um to treat the mental illness, right?
Mhm.
But this mental illness comes from, and Gab or Mate, and I'm sure you know this, but a lot of whenever we have mental health, it comes from from a trauma, right? It comes from being traumatized from something, either subconsciously or not, or not by knowing it or not knowing it. But there's something that happened that has gotten into your body and your fight flight response, and you react and you cope to situations differently. And sometimes that becomes overwhelming. And so that's exactly what it was for her. And she, yeah, would self-medicate with alcohol, and it was getting pretty bad. And then about 4.5 years ago, I mean, she just decided, like, cold turkey, like, I'm just gonna stop. Like, cold
Yeah.
turkey, like, no treatment, no alternative therapies, like nothing. It was just like, I'm just gonna
Wow.
stop, I'm done. And she did it, but the concern that I always had in the 4.5 years was like, you know, you haven't addressed the core issue, you haven't addressed like the
Mhm.
trauma, you haven't healed
Yes.
from that.
Yes.
Like like I understand you've stopped the self medication, which like it's
Mhm.
amazing. It's an amazing thing to do, is stop self medicating like that, just all of a sudden. But if you're not treating the trauma and you're not healing from that, like that's gonna come back. That's gonna come back. And so in the last month, those triggering things that would happen that caused the trauma, those triggering
Yeah.
things have happened again.
Mm, okay.
And it's comments from other people, like, well, one particular person that, really caused the trauma in the first place. So that's come back. And so that self medication has started to creep back in now. And so it's
Okay.
been like a couple weeks, and this week actually, it was the first time where like I realized that it had been like 3 times in the
Mhm.
last like week where she was self-medicating again with alcohol. And although it's like a smaller amount than it was previous, right? Like the
Yeah.
dosage was like much smaller, but it was still a response. It's still self-medication. And so for me, it's just been so difficult because it's just like, as a bystander, there's nothing you can do when someone's going through a challenging, substance use or mental
Mhm.
illness. There's really nothing you can do. You have to just stand by and support and just love and hope and pray that they find the will and the courage to seek that help themselves. But
Mhm.
it's just so hard sometimes to like stand back. You know.
It is, and even that has its effects. Being a bystander, someone who's watching someone that you love go through this too. It's not easy.
Yeah.
So it's also a drain. It's there's other effects to that too. But you said it, just giving your love, supporting, and being there. Really, that's what's going to mark the difference. Because at some point, your friend or the person that you're supporting is going to notice that when they're in a better headspace, they're going to go back to that, right? And they're going to go back to you and say thank you. And so you always appreciate pretty much that support, even though in that moment you can't recognize it,
Yeah.
or right, because it's difficult, because that person in that moment, they're struggling, right? They're
Yeah.
struggling. But at some point, when they're again in the better headspace, they will come to their five senses, right? And so
I hope
it's just
so. Yeah.
being patient, and just really taking advantage of those moments too, where that where that person reaches out and just
Yeah.
really reminding them, right? But again, I could go, these topics are hit close to home, right? And so I
Yeah.
say so much, but I realized that I never said that the fact that, like, going back to you working out and adding in those 15 minutes, and the reason why I said the whole pandemic, right? It was just to realize, and it's something that has helped me or continues to help me. Like, even though we can create like this plan for us, and there are effects to the truth that we are going through a pandemic, that's not an excuse, but it's also to have some compassion for yourself,
Yeah.
right? And that's really what I say, putting yourself first, your health first, and not feeling bad if to say no to people, to projects. That's the other thing, right? Because a lot of my or during the time that I was I guess really occupying myself with projects, and then I realized that I was starting to have, like, withdrawals. It wasn't good. I wasn't in a good place with my health again, where I was realizing that I was having those triggers. um I'm like, no, I'm gonna have to disconnect, even if that made me seem like I wasn't committed. But I'm like, and if, I always say the right people are going to understand,
Yeah.
right? And so it is what it is in that sense. But I guess my biggest message is just really putting yourself first for whatever it
Yeah.
takes. But your health number one. Just being loyal to and being honest to what it is that you want. Um, and then I think when we are full, then we can give to others. But if we
Yeah.
are empty, we can't do anything. And that goes in all senses, right? And for yourself, who, you're a mother, right? You're raising your daughter, and you have to make sure that you're okay so that you can best support your
Yeah.
daughter too. And so on and so forth, right? Like, this is your expertise, right? But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to relay it to your role, right? And so whatever it
Yeah.
is, and even for anyone that's listening, whatever role they may have, what's important is to really put yourself first
Yeah.
so that you can best function in the roles and that you play in your life and professionally, more or less.
Yeah, yeah, I completely love that because I always say that like if I want to be, there for my daughter, the best thing I could do is be the best version of myself for her. So that means, yeah, putting yourself first and knowing, what are your non-negotiables? What do you need to do to take care of yourself, and it's like that airplane analogy where it's like put your own oxygen mask first before you can help anyone else,
Mhm.
right? And so I know you talked about how you pay attention and you have a community and support network, but what are kind of some things that you do regularly, not daily or weekly or monthly, that connects you back to yourself to kind of ask yourself those questions? Are you staying true to what you want? Are you taking care of yourself first? And if not, how can you do that? So do you check in with yourself regularly? And if so, how do you do that? What are some self-care or self kind of help kind of mechanisms or strategies that you apply?
Yeah. So for myself, like, I'm not here as an expert. I'm here as, like, sharing what I've learned, and I'm
Yeah.
in that stage where that's really where I'm at, right? Understanding what I need to do in order to assess that I am where I need to be,
Yeah.
right? Whether that is through more or less, how am I feeling? I do. I guess I self assess a lot, right?
Yeah.
Now, how I ask myself, how am I doing? Um, are there things that I could put, on hold, or that I could wait, right? But going back to what I just said in terms of, really, am I putting myself first? That's the question that I ask myself. Am I putting
Yeah.
myself in, and not in an egotistical way, because sometimes that could be misleading, like only like in a narcissistic way, like me, no, but in a way where I feel good. So for me, my faith is very important, like very, very important. And so even having that time to myself to connect to that, ensuring that I feel connected. If I feel whole, complete, then that's really what's going to ground me. And then that
Yeah.
gives me the right mindset perspective for anything else in terms like, does this align with my values, with what I believe, with what my overall big picture, right? Like, I guess I do have my goals written down. That's the other thing. I have my tasks of the week as well, things that I want to focus on. So, checking in, right? Like, did I cross those things off a list? Or what are the things that I put on hold because they weren't necessarily so important and I could wait. So really for me having a checklist, connecting to my faith for me that when that could be spirituality in whatever way that interprets for anyone listening, right? But I always say that we're whole, we need that wholeness to complete us, right? So whatever it is you set for yourself, it's meditation, right? That's really what
Yeah.
keeps you connected. So just anything for your mental being, your physical being, and just your soul, everything.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered your question,
Yeah, you
but
did. You did. Yeah. I think that's it. That's really the most important thing is just paying attention to yourself, right? Like you said, like, knowing yourself, connecting with yourself and reflecting, I think is a big thing. And it's just like it's just it seems like such an easy thing to do, like self-reflect. Like I need to think about myself, or I need to reflect upon what's going on or my priorities or what I'm doing. It seems like such a simple thing, but it's actually so hard to actually implement and embed into your day, into your weeks regularly. And I think that it's the one that has the most effect. It's most effective in making sure that you're staying true to who you want, and what you want to do, and taking care of yourself. And something you said earlier that I actually want to go back to is you said that you wanted to you realized that you were taking on too many projects and you needed to take a step back and kind of disconnect, even if that meant you didn't seem committed. One of the things that I always say to myself, and that I have realized, is that think my thought process is similar to yours, where I'm like, I need to be on all the time, and especially with my day job. It used to be like I need to be on all the time because I want them to know I'm super committed. And when I would see an email, I would respond right away. It didn't matter what time of the day it was and all that. But what I realized is that you know, everybody else around me were taking breaks, they were setting their boundaries, I'm off at 5, I'm off at 5. And I'm not working weekends. And like I would get some people saying back like, "Hey, I'm not going to respond to you because I'm off after 5, or I'm off on weekends or whatnot." And then I started thinking to myself, I was like, you know what? The story of me feeling like I'm not committed if I check out at 5 o'clock and don't respond to emails, it's just the story I'm telling myself, but it's not the truth. And
mm,
people are and somebody said this to me, and actually I think it was my husband, because he's really good at like being strict of his time and not giving more than he should.
mhm,
But he said, he's like, if the CEO of the company is going to take his lunch break or her lunch break, if the CEO of the company is going to take a vacation, or if they're going to be off at 5 o'clock, or if they're going to take half a day off to go have lunch and just hang out and chill out and relax, then like, why can't you do that? Why can't you do the same thing? If the CEO running that company can do it, why can't you? And I just thought to
mm,
myself, I was like, that's so true. And so now I always take my full break. I never do half breaks. I take the full hour in my day job. And when I'm off, I'm off, and I'm very strict about it now. I work from 7:30 to 3:30, and at 3:30 I'm off, and that's it. And I don't respond to emails. I don't check emails. I leave everything in the office, and then I go back and pick it back up at 7:30 the next day, and I don't respond on weekends. And I'm super super strict about it. And actually, having, like you said, like taking care of yourself and knowing those things that you need to do. um, I think last week was the first time that I actually responded to someone and said, "I'm sorry, I can't take this meeting because I only work until 3:30, and this meeting's at 4." And
oh, wow,
it was amazing because today I went to my email and they actually moved the meeting to fit my time. And
good for you. I'm
and so
happy.
when you said that, I was just,
Yeah.
it's just that came to me. I was just like, that you feeling like maybe you may think, other people may think that you're not committed if you're not checking in, because you're taking time for yourself. That's just most of the time. I feel like these are stories that we tell ourselves, right?
Mm,
Because we may feel like I need to be committed and here's how I show that. But in other people's perspectives, they would rather have you show up refreshed and ready to go and happy, instead of depleted and feeling like, you didn't take that time for yourself.
Mhm. I
Yeah, and
like
so
that.
I'm mindful of the time 'cause I know you gotta go
Yeah.
because you do have another meeting,
Yes,
but,
I do.
I've so appreciated you being on the podcast, and I just have one final question
Yes.
briefly for you, is that if you could go back about 5 years and, knowing everything that you've done now and all that you've accomplished and everything you've been through,
Mhm,
what one piece of advice would you give yourself at that time, knowing that everything you've done in this last 5 years is coming?
mhm.
What's the one thing you would say to yourself?
Don't give up. Keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Don't give
that's
up.
awesome.
Don't give up. Yeah. You're gonna get there.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I love about journaling, honestly, is that you do get to go back to those moments and you see and you're like, wow, in that moment I wanted to give up. And now here I am a year later or 2 years later or 5 years later. And it's like, yeah, that's what I would have said to myself at that time. Like, don't give up. Just keep going. You've got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved having this conversation. I think that there's so much more that we could talk about, and I'm
Yes.
sure we could probably have another whole episode
Yeah.
soon. But I've loved this conversation. I will, like I said, take Gabby and all her accounts onto the show notes on Instagram and all my social media accounts, as well as on my website. So if you have any questions for her, you can reach out to her. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. That was so amazing, and I hope that everyone feels so inspired by everything that Gabby's had to share. Check out her accounts because she shares a lot more on there, and you can connect with her.
Thank you, Angeza. I was happy to be on your podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the end of that episode. I hope that you're inspired by Gabby and everything that she just shared. I think that she's so inspirational about all the stories, the voices that she elevates, and the stories that she shares, and everything that she's shared here. And I can't wait for you to hear the episode. And I hope I can have her back on soon and we can continue that conversation. If you loved what we talked about, and if you want to hear more, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and let us know. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well as like us on all our social media accounts to help us grow. All right, so we only got a couple episodes left for this year. So I hope I can see you guys in January, and I hope that you enjoy your holiday season. Take some time for yourself, take some time to rejuvenate, relax, and just have some fun and enjoy spending time with your loved ones as safely as possible, and everything else. So we'll talk soon. Okay, bye.